Looks like the audio is working. We'll start this. Alright, that's open. Load this. Then we'll get to it. Or not. Gotta change this back to the pen first. Okay, I got honey water today. Warm honey water, so hopefully we can stream longer. It's a nice day out though, kinda makes me want to go outside, but I've already hit the cap on my exercise for now. You can't overtrain your body, it does not end well after all. Deliberately limiting what you do is very useful. It trains both patience as well as allows your body ample time to recover. I mean, you could improve your recovery time by always pushing your limits and everything, but I think in the long run, unless you're extraordinarily careful about it, it's more likely you'll end up causing damage. So, I personally just work more on the bottom line of things. Like, always doing what you're capable of, but making sure you expend all of your energy. If that makes sense. But we're back at it again, doing more of these quick poses and gesture drawings. I think it's definitely helping me out, because the lines I do are definitely more confident, and then I can just see that it's mapping out poses better. I'm also doing it faster, so I think I can actually like incorporate more features in them now too, instead of just the main mass chunks and the limbs. Yeah, like I have a few seconds left because I'm doing this on a 15-second timer. You can't see the image, but after 15 seconds, the pose I'm looking at changes, so I only have that much time to capture it. It's pretty difficult to do, I would say, or at least it was. It's actually not too hard now. The human mind is amazing at what it can adapt to if you put it under repeated stimulus. Like, it just ends up intuitively, I guess, deciphering the pattern, because now it's just all very straightforward. Like, I know now that this is about the size of the torso, how the chest and then the ribs and head all roughly line up, how the pose all is established around those, then how the limbs have certain proportions that you can get down. Probably the hard part to convey now is when there's foreshortening and distortion from perspective. But that's definitely a different thing to train, so I'll just let that naturally accumulate as I continue drawing poses in different directions. That's the fun thing about training real life skills, or skills in real life, should I say. All training you do gives generalized experience. You're never really just training one thing, because it ends up branching into a series of meta skills eventually. And then, before you know it, when you master one thing, you become competent in a few different adjacent areas as well. Pretty sure this is how martial arts work. Like if you pick up karate, you can understand taekwondo and stuff. But anyways, what to talk about today? Well, it's finally nice out. It's been doom and gloom weather for quite a while now through spring. But today is sunny and then warm enough to enjoy a nice stroll outside. Seasonal depression syndrome is definitely a thing. It might not actually be super serious in my case, but I think just having overcast skies puts on a damper for every day, especially if it's sustained over a month-long period or more. When is Mental Awareness Month? Is it May? I need to remember when that is. It's an important thing to keep in mind. I have deep lore about that, but you haven't quite unlocked the friendship meter to reach that heart event yet. So maybe later. For now though, I'm just sitting here, grinding away at this art skill and then yapping. It's so interesting, the act of content creation in general. Like, I'd consider streaming content creation as well as making videos, but I guess the act of streaming is interesting. Some people stream just to have company, others stream because they want to make it a full-time career, so on and so forth. Everyone has their own rationale and purpose behind streaming. I personally am of the mind that when I'm making any type of content, be it writing, drawing, or streaming like this, that I want to provide something of value to the people who encounter me. Either some insight into life, a snippet of how to improve at a skill, or just general things to think about, like generating input so that you can have a good output. And doing that while streaming is difficult, I feel, because it's a lot of improvisation. I guess you could react to games and things, but when it's just like this, where I'm sketching and then talking and yapping, it's a bit difficult to come up with something meaningful. I mean, I guess seeing the process of creativity, though I wouldn't really call this creation, is useful, as well as the process of training. But I mean, I don't think it's super tangible. That's why I'm kind of yapping about philosophy and cognition and stuff, because I think that it's something people don't really consider much these days. Like, have you noticed that? Well, I don't know, but I think that there used to be a giant fear of being brainwashed in the 2000s and so. But I'm surprised to see that it just kind of doesn't exist anymore. And I'm somewhat concerned that it's actually happening. Because the brainwashing where like hypnosis and all that happens, well, I won't discount it. I will say that it's not very plausible, but the more subtle things are. Since, like I've mentioned before, the brain is a pattern-seeking machine, the more you generate similar phenomenon in your mind, or the more you're exposed to similar things, the more your brain begins to associate it with truth, because there's such a wide mountain, or such an overwhelming mountain of evidence in your mind based upon what you've seen. And that feeds into the algorithm of social media, right? Things that you see on your accounts are what you are more likely to interact with. But because of that, it ends up becoming a sort of self-fueling cycle echo chamber where you get more and more and more of the same stuff. Unless you go out of your way to fix your algorithm. But going back to the main point, I wonder if that isn't actively brainwashing people, if not intentionally, unintentionally, because the more you see of similar things, the more your mind starts to shift to, I hate the word alignment because I hear it all the time, but it does ring a bit true. Like you start moving according to what you see on a daily basis. And when you doom scroll so much, especially if it's late at night when you're tired, you lack the willpower required to reject the beliefs, thoughts, and messages being sent your way by the social media algorithm and by the content creators. And that's something interesting too. Influencer. I think that term is used lightly, but it shouldn't be used lightly because it's definitely true. It's on the tin. You are an influencer. You go out of your way, and then your thoughts and beliefs that you portray influence the thoughts and actions of other people. It's most definitely true. And that's my concern about the continued widespread use of social media. It has been for the past few decades? 2 decades? 10 decades? I don't remember when the first social media came out, but I've always been a bit hesitant to be on social media because of the fact that it is a not breeding ground, but battle royale of thoughts and beliefs. And while I'm not one to tout my own horn, I do have a very strong sense of self, as well as a natural rebellious nature, at least nowadays. And I'm confident in catching or rejecting when someone is trying to push. The term push an agenda is used so much these days, but I guess it's true in this case. I want to say more like they're trying to push a thought or a way of life, something along those lines. And I actively speak saying I reject this message or this does not apply to me. But there's a very real, at least in my viewpoint, danger that occurs when you're just passively consuming content. You end up becoming a patchwork of beliefs, thoughts, viewpoints, and false evidence sometimes that you perceive online. It's very, very easy to make things look believable on a first glance these days, especially in the age of generative AI. The problem is that things seem close enough or correct enough, and then if you're not careful, that can definitely, what's the word? Impress itself? Sink inside your sense of self? It'll like, not taint, but etch itself into your core sense of self. And that's the real danger. The other danger is when people are arguing about truths or what they believe to be true, and then they are actively condemning, I forget how to pronounce that word. They're actively condemning the way someone chooses instead of the way they believe. And that's something else too that I've noticed. Choice and belief are very much conflated these days. Someone could choose to do something but not believe in it, and someone could believe in something and not choose to do anything about it. What we should be concerned about are the choices that someone makes more than what they believe. You can believe something terrible, but if you never act upon it, then it's generally fine, especially if you don't vocalize it ever either. Someone could be a terrible person, but if they live their entire life never acting on it, then you'd call them a saint, right? It's things like that. But the problem is that these days people equate words as actions. And they are in a way, but they're not meaningful action. The spoken and written word allows someone to materialize their inner world, but it's still transient. Like, the words you say and the words you throw online exist, but they don't have a very high impact. It's only when you create something or go out of your way to do something that the words you have will properly gain weight. For example, if you had sat down and then you articulated your entire viewpoint, for example, and you constantly posted that video everywhere, that would be action, because you are both recording your thoughts and then you're actively moving to spread it as far as you can. That is action. But just throwing something out there... Oh, dang, ran out of memory. Crazy. But anyways, just throwing something out there in the wild of social media, or throwing a like on someone spousing a message, that doesn't really do anything. I mean, sure, it increases engagement and potentially increases exposure on the message, but that doesn't create material change, because you're not really putting your mind, or not your mind on it. You're not putting your name on it. A lot of people these days don't use their full name for their social media accounts, right? Because they don't want to be exposed and risk retaliation in reality. But while I understand the dangers of that, you do realize that when you do that, your opinion doesn't truly hold any weight, since it's anonymous. Anyone can say anything when their identity is hidden, and it won't have proper meaning. Well, I guess that's not completely true, since there are logical explanations that are just valid regardless of your identity. But if you're stating an opinion, for example, or a proper belief, if you don't put your name on it, then it doesn't really have any weight, in my opinion. Ah, shoot. I fell into the trap of saying, in my opinion. I'll just say it outright. It doesn't have any weight if you don't put your name on it, or if you don't state your convictions on it. And that's also something else I've noticed. People these days on social media, when they are commenting, tend to leave room for backpedaling. Like, when confronted with invalid proof, they will try to weasel out of it one way or another by stating either a counter example that they think invalidates the premise, or by jumping to a point that doesn't align with the initial premise to begin with. That's, I guess, interesting is all I could say about that. I don't know. As I don't think I'm a millennial. I won't say my exact age, but as someone who's seen the internet change for a while, the social norms have changed too, I think. And I do wonder if that's a result of offloading everything to the automated systems we have in place now. It's become so commonplace to be commodified, like fitting in has become the norm. And it always was kind of the norm to try to fit in. But fitting in is so generic these days. I just see, like, I'll be sitting on Instagram, for example, right? And I'll scroll for, say, an hour while I'm working out, and I will likely hear the exact same script for a video said by 2 or 3 different people. And they'll try to pass it off as their own thing. But it's not really theirs, because it doesn't originate from them. And that's the other thing too. Like, people, I hear... Oh, let me give an example. I don't know if... Maybe it was misrepresented, but I saw a clip of Jacksepticeye saying that it's so easy to... Or it's much easier, I shouldn't say so easy. It's much easier to start on social media these days and content creation, since you can just see what people are doing that works and copy them. But I do wonder if copying... If that advice has been taken too far. People say to copy in order to learn, or to copy the greats. But in the age of generative AI, where it's so easy to copy, it reaches a point where you're not actually copying anymore, you're echoing. And echoing is different from copying. The whole point of copying, or like the old saying, no, what's the saying? Is it that the great steal? Shoot, I'm feeling very uneducated right now. Maybe it's because I did too much cardio today. But the point I'm trying to articulate is that the reason you copy something is to understand the fundamental principles of it. But people are just copying to copy these days and expect to replicate the results that someone else achieved verbatim, like copy paste instead of sketching or tracing to learn. That's the fatal trap, because it's true that if you copy something on social media, you will replicate at least a portion of their success. And then you can use yourself as like the distinguishing factor. But if it's just you, like the way you look, as the distinguishing factor, there's no real substance to it. You basically become another brand of strawberry milk. Strawberry milk on its own is good. So anyone who finds strawberry milk will enjoy the strawberry milk. But if you have a different label, it doesn't matter. They don't pay attention to what label. They pay attention to the fact that they got strawberry milk. That's what happens when you copy content these days. Like, sure, the content you're copying is valuable, and sure, you're going to be getting some result. Just like how an off-brand strawberry milk, or chocolate milk for that matter, can get profit. But you aren't being you. You're just like making a product. You're commodifying yourself and making yourself generic. I don't think that's a good way to live. The whole point about life is for you to walk the path you choose. We are not the thoughts that we think. We are not the body we inhabit. We are not even the mind that perceives the world. We are the will, the deciding factor. Literally the deciding factor. We are who decides. And the moment you actively decide to replicate someone else and just copy their essence, you are deleting yourself from being a being. You have become a product. I guess there's nothing inherently incorrect about it, but at the same time, there's not anything inherently valuable in it either, because you're not adding anything to this world. You're echoing, and echoes fade over time. If they didn't, then we'd still be hearing reverberations from the distant past. I guess a counterpoint to this would be starlight, since what we're seeing in the skies are actually not the actual stars, but the ghost light of stars that have potentially long gone. But those are stars. You have to burn bright enough and unique enough to be seen even after you're long gone. An echo will fade, but a star will remain even after they're dead. Right? So the whole meta, I guess, of copying what works on social media, it's not giving you success. It's just giving you numbers. And numbers are arbitrary, inherently meaningless, and valueless. Unless you consider your value to be in money, but that's a different discussion altogether. My question to you would then be, why do you value money when money is a social construct? It's tied to something of value, but money itself is just a number. Sure, you can use that number to purchase things, and sure, you can assign value to things using that number as a metric. But it's still just a number. And there are things in life that money cannot purchase either, like a completely trained body. You can't just point and say, oh, I want to be jacked, and then buy being jacked. Even if you get like the absolute best gear, you'll still have to put in some work in the gym to get muscles. It's not a wonder drug or a miracle panacea. It's just an advantage. And at the end of the day, the value is always internal. So your relationship with money actually boils down to the relationship you have with assigning value in life and assigning value to things. For example, say that there is a bag that costs $10,000, right? And there's a bag that costs $5. Just on a general look over, you could say that the more expensive bag has more value, right? But what if the $5 bag was the last work of an artist who is on their deathbed, and that $5 is the last bit that they need to make sure that their family is taken care of? Then the cost of the bag is irrelevant, really. The value is in what it does. This analogy probably is not complete because I'm spitballing it, but the core that I'm trying to get across is that money is a bit arbitrary, because the most expensive things in life are not necessarily the most valuable things in life. I'm of the mind that money should be viewed as basically a health bar in a game. It allows you, or I guess a health bar isn't the right word, it'd be like stamina in gacha games, or an energy bar. It's what allows you to perform activities, but that's about it. When you run out of money, you have to go and then replenish it in order to continue with the outcomes and actions you were actively pursuing. But if you keep focusing on the money itself, there's no point. Like, if we analogize it to a gacha game, what's the point in grinding energy to get more energy, right? Or more stamina? You get the ability to do more things, but you use it to get more ability to do more things, and then you repeat it forever, and you're not playing the game. The whole point of, like, say, a gacha game is not the energy, but is to either collect your fancy characters or to enjoy the story. If you just focus on gaining more energy or more currency, then you're just pausing everything. You've put life itself on a pause. And while you can do that, and while it might be necessary at some point, because, for example, there are certain things you can't do without a threshold of energy in gacha games. Like, there are some dungeons that require X amount of stamina, for example. You shouldn't be making it the end-all be-all, since it won't actually do anything. What I'm trying to say is that money should be seen as a reflection of your value instead of something to be pursued. It's most healthy when it's seen as something that comes to you based upon what you do, instead of something that you have to go out of your way to obtain. Because if you think about it, if you have things that are of high value to people, they will exchange money to obtain what you have that is of high value. Or if you can provide a service that has high value, they will give you money in response to the value that you provide for them. But if you're just trying to get money, I guess the analogy... No, let's see. What would you do to get strictly money? I guess gambling, right? Like, say you're sitting there and you're gambling, and then you win like a jackpot, and then you keep spending it to get more and more and more money. At that point, you're just seeing the number go up. That number has no correspondence to your life. It doesn't do anything for you. It's only when you leave the casino that the number means anything. Otherwise, it's just a number. Oh, is that how casinos get you? I guess so, huh? Wow, life epiphany, live on stream. Casinos get you because they make you reduce your money down into just a number until you end up blowing it all. But yeah, it's, I think, very useful to convert money into physical objects. Like, let me get a drink first. Alright, so like $5, oh, it's not $5 anymore, but let's pretend that $5 is a burger, right? But $5 is also a coffee. What holds more value to you then? A coffee or a burger? For me personally, it would be the burger. So if I got the craving to get a coffee, I would think about it and be like, okay, is this worth more to me than a burger? If the answer is yes, then I'd get the coffee. If not, then I'd either go get the burger or save for the burger. This is a good way to ground yourself so that you don't lose track of the value of money, which is very easy to do these days when everything is so digital. Like, for example, the US stopped printing pennies. Pennies don't really get circulated anymore, except for what people still have lying around. Like, there are no new pennies, at least as far as I am aware. Similarly to that, where was I going with this point? I don't remember, but functionally, it's important to have metrics that you make for yourself, not metrics that other people have given you. People might say that something is worth X amount of money, but to you it might mean more. And you should not be ashamed about the fact that something is less value in money when it has a lot of internal value to you. You also shouldn't feel guilty about spending a lot on something if it's something that you value with a lot of your life. Like if it's something very core to your sense of self or identity. Because money should be treated as a resource for you to obtain what makes you you. Is what you're spending money on shaping your life, or is it not? Is a question I like to think to myself. I guess this applies to time too. And it's probably something that people don't think about very often. Time is a replenishing currency, but it's not an infinite currency. You have 24 hours every day to work with, but you don't know how many days you have to work with. That's the trap that people fall into. Sure, you might have these 24 hours, and you might have this day, but you don't know if you have the next day. So if you consider life as a casino, where the hours are your chips, you have to consider which activity is going to give you the most return. And to begin deciding what gives you the most return, you have to know what you value in life. Do you value peace, inner serenity? Do you value connection? Do you value happiness? Things like that. You have to sit down and consider what you hold most esteemed in your life. Because otherwise you're going to be throwing your chips away for nothing. It'll be like walking around in a casino and just dropping $100 on a slot machine just because. Sure, you might win a jackpot, and sure, it might help you, but the question is if that's something you want to risk, and if you're actively choosing. I don't know. To me, what I hold most important in life is the capacity to choose and the consequences of choosing. Like I said earlier, we are the thing that chooses. We are the deciding factor. So it's important that when you act, the action is a result of a decision, an active decision. Is it an exercise of your will? If it's not, then you should consider why it's not an exercise of your will. Because the funny thing about regret is that it's actually a byproduct of not exercising your will. You regret what you do not do, right? That's what people always say. Well, if you actively chose something, that means that you gave something else up. So you can't regret it because you sacrificed it. I guess you could have pain over it, you can have remorse over it, but regret should be reserved for what you chose not to do. It's a very different thing from the remorse and the pain, as well as the aftermath of taking an incorrect action. Because if you did something incorrectly, then you face the consequences. But at the same time, you can own those consequences because they are the result of the choice you made. But regret is the result of not making a choice. So you're always left hanging. The consequence never reached you, and you're stuck with the infinite consequences of what if. If you live your life, though, by actively choosing things and exercising your will, you actually won't regret much, if at all. Because you will have a reason to fall back on for every action and activity you do. Like, why did I not go to meet this person on that day? Well, I had chosen to do this instead. And then, because you chose it full-heartedly, then whatever occurred afterwards is simply the consequence of your choice. This might be a bit of an absolutist way of thinking, since it kind of short-circuits everything. But I do think it's a bit healthier than spinning on endless anxiety and wallowing in regret, since you continuously march forward and you accept the consequences that occur from your actions. If you did something wrong, then take these steps to rectify the incorrect decision that you made. Don't sit around waiting and thinking, what if that day I had done something else? Because at the end of the day, you didn't do something else. And if you had chosen to do that, if you knew full-heartedly what you were choosing, there's nothing to be hung up about, because that was you and your choice, and you just have to own your choice. I guess a caveat here would be if you didn't know any better, but then at the same time, you didn't know any better, so the choice didn't exist. It's only hindsight that reveals the existence of a choice. That's something else that I have thought about too. Oftentimes, the existence of a choice induces the choice. Like, I guess we can talk about this then. Like how in modern hookup culture, right? Or I guess modern dating culture. Modern dating culture? Just how people date nowadays. With dating apps, there is always another option, right? You can always look for another match. You might not find another match, but the potential to find another match is there. The problem is that since the choice exists, the choice in front of you appears to lose its meaning, because you have a potentially infinite value waiting for you, so you ignore the value that you have directly in front of you and what you find. You end up chasing what might not exist. Or you see what you like in what you have now, and then you wonder if there's something that has everything you have right now but more. And that's the danger in mindset that leads to not having anything at all. There was something that I wanted to go and explain more about that, but the traffic outside interrupted my train of thought. what was it? Inducing thoughts. No, the choice induces another choice. Oh, yeah. I mean, that applies to love in general. Like, when you choose someone, no one else should exist. That's what commitment is. If you are choosing to commit to someone, you have decided to eliminate all other options. That's really what commitment means. It's not about sustaining your choice, which what most people see it as. It's about removing other options. When you commit to something, you have no other decisions to make. There are no other choices you are making. That's the meaning of the word. Or at least, I don't know if that's a definite dictionary definition. But that's how you should view it as. And that's why marriage is seen as so, or should be seen as so absolute, so sanctified. The gravitas of the choice is what gives it value there. Where was I going with this? I guess what I'm trying to say is that when you're committed to something, you have to erase the ability to choose. Some people might say, but what if something better comes out? But then you have to realize that when you commit to something, you are making the choice to yourself to say that I have decided that this is what I want to keep forever. And even if something else comes up, this is my life now. You are defining yourself with commitments. You're not getting things, you're making who you are. That's why people who are committed to the gym have it as a way of life. That's why people who are committed to their partners, at least people who are doing it properly, revolve their, well, I guess revolve is the wrong word, but they weave their life into their partners until it's one tapestry. You are together but separate at the same time. Like how red and green light make yellow, if you look at it. I forget the exact color combinations, but something like that. Can you tell I'm a writer? I'm using all of these metaphors while I'm discussing life. Man, this music is such a vibe. I didn't think that it'd make me so contemplative. But I guess that's just the sort of day it is today, too. I don't know. Been doing a lot of thinking about life in general these days, so just want to put it out there in the universe in case someone needed to hear it. Because I've noticed that in this day of everyone trying to make it on social media, a lot of people will say things just to say things, or they'll speak with such conviction without any substance behind what they're saying. But the conviction will short circuit what people believe. So I want to at least put out my thoughts and then have it like a seed so that you can either agree or disagree, or at least stop you in your track when it comes to thinking about stuff like this. Because it's so easy to continuously scroll without hesitation on things. Oh, well, maybe I guess this isn't the right platform to do that, considering that you have to click on this stream to see it. Maybe I should turn this into a series of shorts. That's a food for thought. But in any case, it's important to just, I don't know, for me, it's important to provide value. And I just hate people, and I use the word hate properly. Like, it actually viscerally annoys me when people try to dominate others with their will. Even the subtle things, like imperative words and commands, kind of annoy me. I'm doing my best to not use them as often, but it's difficult to catch it because I command myself often. So when I'm talking, I might use declarative and imperative languages or language. But functionally, or essentially, what I'm saying is that the only one you should be commanding, or the only person whose commands you should be listening to is yourself. You can choose to accept someone else's command, but that kind of chips away at your willpower every time you do. For me, when someone asks me to do something, like for example, go wash the dishes, I will internally say, I reject your command, but I acknowledge that the dishes need to be washed, so I will go wash the dishes. It's a rejection of the enforcement of will, while also deciding that the act itself has value and then performing the act. It's a bit of semantics, but semantics matter when it comes to the core of the self-identity. It's also how manipulators get people over time, and how toxic relationships form. It's a slow erosion of self by making people do things for you. Or say I'm the manipulator, right? If I wanted someone to be under my control, then obviously, just going by logic, I want them to not resist in terms of responding to commands. Clearly, if you get off the bat by doing something huge and audacious, like saying, give me $1,000, for example, they won't do it. But if you slowly build up the erosion of self by making them accept small commands over time, they'll slowly but surely get comfortable with obeying, and that's how those people trick and trap people. Particularly women, I feel, because since women are more emotional, I don't know if that's actually true or not, but assuming that the premise holds that women are more emotional, it becomes easier to put that tactic into play, since they'll be rarely catching the command hidden within until it becomes habitual and they just end up that way. Pretty sure this is actually how abusive relationships form. Well, that's not on my bingo card today, but I guess I figured that out. But manipulation, I don't know. Maybe it's because I have the capacity to manipulate others, but I always find it very scary how simple it is. If you're subtle enough about it, if you have the conviction in doing so, and the both audacity as well as lack of shame, you can make people do whatever you want them to do, unless they are actively aware or on guard of you. And while I am fairly skilled at picking up when people are trying to get things, because I'm both a logical person as well as just, I guess, well versed in manipulation. It's easy for me to see when people are trying that, but I can see how simple it'd be for other people to fall into it since they aren't aware. And I'm pretty sure that is why social media influencers are succeeding so much these days. Because since younger individuals have access to social media, but since I think the media literacy in general has fallen, like people don't question things anymore as far as I can tell. Or if they do, they don't do it as often. Especially with the age, with the, I keep saying the age. Can you tell that I'm dating myself? With the advent of generative AI, people are taking things at face value more often. And face value these days is not necessarily true value. I would argue that is rarely true value these days. Pretty much everything you see at face value these days, unless you're in person, is false. But even if you are in person, it's very difficult. There's just so much information out there today on learning how to do anything. If you're not, you don't even need to be smart about it. If you're creative in asking, I'll use the default and say ChatGPT, but any sort of generative AI, they can help you learn how to do things that you wouldn't be able to find on a normal internet search. And that's kind of scary. If you want to know how to manipulate someone or do something to someone, I'm fairly sure, though I haven't tried it myself, that you could ask ChatGPT. You could probably tease the prompt in a way to get past the restrictions, and it'll give you a working plan. I mean, people use it for fitness training, don't they? Or even content creation. I don't see why you can't use it for nefarious purposes if you're creative about it. Which is pretty frightening if you think about it. So I guess that's all wrapping back around to my point of wanting to provide proper value for anyone who comes across me in general. I want to have people exercise their force of will more. It's become an era where people are too comfortable letting other people decide for them. Willpower is at an all-time low. People say you should be mad about X, and then some people will say, oh, that's correct. And then when enough people say that, you default to the, I hate to say it, but the herd mentality. Individualism is important. You are not what other people believe. You are what you believe, and you do not have to hold what other people believe. It's fine to agree on one part and disagree on another part. In fact, you should ask yourself if you agree or disagree, and then determine why. Do you choose it? Or are you going out of momentum? That's very important to consider in life, since living on autopilot is not really living at all. It'll be harder if you're not living on autopilot, but hard is just another word for unfamiliar. And isn't the whole point of living to experience new things? We're all here for the first time, so of course it's unfamiliar. It's going to be hard. There's no reason why it wouldn't be, if you're living properly. If it's not hard, then it's not, then that means it's familiar to you. So you should probably ask yourself why it's familiar. Did you make it familiar? Is it similar to something else you've done? I don't know. Things like that are what enters the mind, or thoughts like that are what enters the mind when you take some time to inquire into the root cause of things. I just have a habit of asking why. Like, why do we need to do this? And then, what was the purpose of the person who started this type of action? What is the intention behind it? The original intention? What can it be used for? Things like that. Maybe that's because of my tendency to always be training skills. I tend to look at life very much through kind of a RPG lens. Like, maybe it's from the days of playing too many visual novels with bad endings, but I always question choices, as well as the skills and then thoughts, basically just the plot. Like, if someone does something, I'll pretty often consider the rationale behind it. Are they doing this because they are exercising their will? Are they actually choosing this, or are they just autopiloting? Sad to say, most times, and most people I meet these days are autopiloting. It could just be the people around me personally, but I found that when I listen closely, what they're saying echoes a lot of what I've heard online from different people, and I'll be able to catch when that is. I don't know, that just kind of, not kind of, it actually bothers me that originality has slowly but surely begun to fade in the general population. Like, just walking around Walmart or a grocery store and then listening in to people, or at the airport and then listening in to what people say, the common denominator is now literally a common denominator. There are things, like there is a baseline, I hate to say it, but like a baseline NPC. Certain beliefs are espoused and echoed quite frequently if you're listening in. And I just really hate that. It bothers me so much. I can't even... No, I do know why it bothers me. It's because my core belief is that we all choose. And not exercising that choice is very, very bothersome to me. Like, I'm here actively choosing to structure my day in this way. You can too, but you're not doing it, even though you have the power to do so. Not just power, you have the right to do so. The privilege. The, I would say, imperative to do so. But you don't. Maybe this is because I watched the movie Click so long ago by Adam Sandler. The core of the movie is that he finds a magic remote at a Bed Bath & Beyond, emphasis on the beyond part, and it can do things like fast forward, rewind, pause, etc. But then he uses it to fast forward his life because he thinks that some parts are boring, so he skips past it. But then it becomes, I think it's a metaphor for life really, where the book, or no, the remote just keeps fast forwarding him past major points of his life. Before he knows it, he's living a life that's not his. It's just been an autopilot the entire time. And then he's looking back at the end of everything and realizing that his life was worthless because it wasn't his to begin with. He just had let life run its course. Of course, the movie has a happier ending, and then it plays back by him waking up in Bed Bath & Beyond without ever having fast-forwarded his life. Kind of like a moral of the story kind of deal. But the thing is that I think that is basically what people are doing these days. They're using social media and electronics, basically escapism. They're doing it to fast forward life, all without realizing that by not exercising their will, they are dooming their life to become something that they never wanted because they didn't choose it. You have to choose your life, otherwise it will become something you didn't choose. That's just simple logic. It's not even like motivation. If you don't go out of your way to set things up for yourself, other people will exert their will upon you. And that bothers me because it's just so sad. Eventually it'll reach a point where it's irreversible, and then what you could have had becomes what you never will have, especially when people who should have been in your life disappear because of that. It goes back to the whole regret thing I mentioned earlier, where it becomes very easy to live without regret if you exercise your will, but otherwise you will have many regrets if you don't exercise your will. Did not expect to get this deep today. We're only acquaintances. But I basically dumped a whole deep conversation on you. If this was a date, I think this is the part where things might get awkward, or we'd realize that we're meant to be together forever. Interesting. I guess this music really set up the mood, huh? But I don't know. My voice is actually holding up pretty well today. I guess I'll keep talking. What time is it? Still pretty early. I think I can go for another hour. I'm running out of parchment here, or parchment. I'm running out of room here on this canvas. Might have to make a new layer. That's a first. Let me sip on some of my warm honey water first. Okay, I think that definitely is helping. Or maybe just the fact that I've streamed for the past few days and talked is building up the vocal stamina. Voice doesn't hurt, so that's a plus. I do wonder if I should just clip a lot of this deep talk and post it. Maybe I will. No, I think I will, but not now. Maybe over the weekend. I don't know. Content creation is always a decision tree to work through. But I guess if you have the purpose in mind, if you can answer the question why, then it becomes pretty straightforward. I want to provide value to people who see me, so I guess that means that I will go chop up what I just talked about into shorts, since I'm fairly certain I had just said some very important things. It has slipped my mind already because I do not have a running tally of the things I talk about. But I get the gist that I probably said some important things, so I'll so I will replay this and see what would be good to post. That's something that I'll be doing. I guess I can talk about this. I forget if it's something that is a synthesis of many things I've heard or if it's an actual saying. But I like the pair of sentences that go, if you want what no one else has, you have to do what no one else does. And I am putting that into practice right now, as you can see. I am doing what no one else does by doing this quick pose thing where I am constantly sketching out poses in 15 seconds or less. And people would say what is for, and I would say I don't know, but I do know that I will get something out of it. It's literally skill creation, I think, right? I'll get something out of this because I'm feeding so much raw data to my mind. I think that's the magic in doing new things, like actually new things, where people aren't doing it. Because everyone can follow the crowd and get expected results, right? Like if you lower your calorie intake, if you go to the gym, you get your macros right, you lift heavy, you will end up building muscle and then looking better and being healthier. But what if, instead of pushing to your limits, you deliberately operate within your limits all the time, but for an extended period of time? So then it's not a matter of tiring yourself out, but expending the time throughout the day, right? What happens then? That's a question I'm posing to myself and trying to answer personally. But it's things like that. Like, if you go out of your way to do something that you see people not doing, you won't get what they have. But it doesn't necessarily mean you'll get the opposite of what they have either. You'll just get something else, and that something else is where the magic happens. Because you don't know until you have it, right? Like, you don't know what that something else is. Take my training for my martial arts training, for example. I spend probably an unhealthy or an insane amount of time every day training martial arts. Like 4 hours minimum, more often 8 hours a day. And I train it by literally just hitting a bag each day with different strikes. Kicks, punches, just random things. Sometimes without even proper form. I just hit the bag. Like literally hit the bag. But the funny thing is, I've been doing that for the past 2 months now. And I have realized that I've gotten an intuition for kinetic chains. If I have to describe that jargon, a kinetic chain, I don't know if it's an actual term or not, but from my understanding, it's the link of energy transfer from potential to kinetic when you are performing a strike. So it's like a series of energy transformations that turn muscle tension, weight, rotation, torso rotation, things like that. You basically convert the body's energy into the force of a strike. And I have found that I have a just kind of a sense for that now because of how much I've hit the bag. I can tell roughly how much force I need to exert to get a certain feedback. And then like how much I need to turn my body, or if I don't turn my body, how much force I'll generate here, how much speed it'll be. Things like that. But I didn't go in the training with a mindset to unlock that skill or anything like that. It's just a byproduct of trying out what I didn't see other people doing. And this act that I'm doing right now of training my drawing skills by doing these quick poses is another thing I'm testing. I think that this is giving me quite a few benefits already. I just don't know what they are yet because I haven't actually applied anything yet. But from what I can see right now, just generally, definitely confidence in line work. Like, I don't hesitate when it comes to putting down what I see. It's definitely not complete or accurate most of the time, but it's recording what I can see onto the page in an understandable format that I can later refine. And I think that's definitely the more useful skill I'm getting here, rather than just the act of learning how to draw people in different poses. It's more building a meta skill that I didn't know exist, I think. That's my intuition of it, especially since I am deliberately focusing on the process itself and not intending anything in particular. I am letting my brain free flow in assessing the series of inputs I'm providing and letting it do with it what it desires. Whatever emerges as a result of that is just natural then, since I didn't force anything. It's an act of witnessing rather than an act of manifesting. I guess it would be emergent manifestation rather than deliberate, if we really wanted to discuss it in those terms. But I don't know. Life is multifaceted. There are many things you can do in life and many paths you can take. But some paths are not traveled, and they might have jackpots behind them. So I guess the moral of the story here is to just take the scenic route. See what unfolds when you do that. Or if you see someone doing something, try the opposite. Maybe something extremely valuable will emerge as a result. Things like that. Kind of running out of thoughts now. Reaching the point in the stream and the day where my dialogue tree is being depleted. Not sure what else to even say. I guess I can talk about streaming in general and then other VTubers maybe. I do think about the field of VTubing as a whole. A lot of people get into it because they enjoy it, right? But at the same time, they are trying to pin too much on it, I think. And they believe that it's easy or it'll be simple. I guess streaming in general is like that. And I do wonder if it's a matter of simply not investing enough time. Because I see a lot of VTubers starting out and they only stream a little every day. And then they're kind of like upset at how they're performing, right? Or I'm talking about performing in the terms of analytics. I do wonder if that's like a fatal flaw or a career-killing trap to fall into. Because the point of VTubing and the point of streaming isn't to entertain, really. I mean, I guess it is in a way, because you are an entertainer. But I also feel like it's not the only thing you should be doing. Because at the end of the day, if you are setting out to, or if you do something with the purpose to elicit a reaction in someone else, you will often be disappointed because you cannot control how people react. You can only control how you react and then how you output things, like the actions you do. So if you go out of your way to try and be entertaining, for example, you're probably setting yourself up to fail because there's just too many things that go into being quote-unquote entertaining. First of all, do you understand what entertaining is? Second of all, what's entertaining to you might not be entertaining to the general populace. Third of all, are you sure you want to be going towards the general populace to begin with, right? Because what I think a lot of people fail to recall or to remember is that you are not like a lot of other people. Sure, there is a lot of people on Earth, and then just in terms of numbers, there will be people who just probability-wise share in a lot of your experiences, but the totality of your experiences and the complete combination, that's rare. Like, I can say for myself, I highly, highly, highly doubt you will meet an attorney who has written 3 million words, who has programmed a full visual novel, who is a fan of anime, who is a fan of VTubers, who can do martial arts, who has done martial arts, who works out, who defaults to lateral thinking, who is a patent agent, who can do XYZ. I could just go on and on and on. But if you think about your life, you can find a similar list of things too. It's the exact combination that makes you stand out. And you should be showcasing that combination. If you just lean into one facet, sure, you will begin to accumulate a large amount of followers or people who can sympathize and connect with that facet of yours. But overall, that's not all of you, right? And I think that's the flaw that a lot of VTubers are facing right now, because they are following trends and they are imitating what they see and what they like. But the problem is that imitating only works and serves you well enough to understand the methodology behind it. You can't become a perfect copy of someone else. You can become a good copy, but then that's not you, so what's the point? And something else I've noticed too is that, I don't know, a lot of VTubers, particularly the female VTubers, share a voice. Like, there is definitely a VTubing voice, or maybe a VTubing accent. It's the speech mannerisms that they utilize when they're talking. And it kind of rings hollow. At least to me it does. Because it's like, I hear it and I hear traces of other people in them. Which isn't bad. But it's like, how are you then? I don't know, maybe I'm just conceited because I enjoy my own voice and the way that I speak. My manner of speaking is derived from how I write. And I also am very... what's the word? Firm? Opinionated? I can't really condense what I'm trying to say into words. It's just like a feeling I have. But basically, I just have the gist that I definitely don't talk like how other people talk. Or if I do, and I'm being a hypocrite, I'll find out when people point it out. But I spend a lot of time with myself, so I don't think that any echoes of other people resound in my voice, at least not enough to point out exactly. Maybe my voice might sound like someone else, but I don't think that my way of speaking and how I see things is similar to other people. It's kind of like how you can tell that some people or some streamers are definitely fans of other streamers because they intentionally or not copy quite a few of the speech mannerisms, vocal tics, and other things. But I think it's important to be comfortable with your own voice when you are being a content creator and celebrating it. Celebrating is the wrong word. Accepting it is correct, but not quite what I'm trying to say either. Embracing, I guess, is the closest. Like, you have to lean into what you are in order to have other people be around for you. Because, like, anyone can show off a skill, right? And anyone can stream a game. Anyone can show off something cool or do a particular task or react to something or echo a trend. But you are your thoughts and choices. You are your experiences. You are your will, the consequences of the decisions you've made. And the series of decisions you made is unique. That's really what people will stay around for, because you serve as an avenue of choices that others have not made, and you are a glimpse ahead at where they could walk. That's probably the best way of seeing things, because hate to break it to you, but in life you are never really you to other people. You are an extension of how they view life itself. To someone, what you are is filtered through their life experiences. So they'll use you as input, but they're always going back to how they have lived and using you as a kind of metric to work against. That's why so often when you go to fan meetups of, I guess, YouTubers, but also just any general star, quote unquote, there are always people who say, "You changed my life," and so on. And it's not that someone actually changed or actively changed that person's life, but it's that by showing your life experience and then by conveying the series of choices you've made, you go and then you let them think about the world in a way that they hadn't until that point. Or you give them hope in a time where nothing but despair existed. That's the real value in being a content creator. It's to give who is watching you something that they cannot have for themselves. And people choose different avenues to go about it. We see Mr. Beast do it by spending obscene amounts of money and showing how people could have that much money. He is giving the experience of greed, essentially. Then you have people like Markiplier, who is giving empathy and rapport. Basically acting as a friend to whoever needs it, and then playing a game like your friend so that you have company when you might be completely alone in life. A lot of VTubers are like that too, I think, where they just want to provide you company. And if you're streaming for that, I think that's fine. But I guess the objective truth is that you aren't necessarily going to be the right company for everyone. Especially if you're bombastic or very high energy. That day, and I think of streaming has kind of passed now. I suppose that there are going to be a lot of younger audience members who will definitely enjoy that sort of high energy appeal still. But if I had to speak on my assessment of just the viewerships of streams, I think that we're all adults now, aren't we? Like working adults. Even the high schoolers back when VTubing kicked off, right, are either graduating or have graduated now. And, well, to begin with, you probably don't want to be appealing to high schoolers anyways, right, if you're a VTuber. I mean, unless you are that age, but it's my understanding that a lot of VTubers are older, at least in their 20s. And for that audience base of your peers, my understanding is just that it's not that high beat anymore, high tempo. We're all kind of tired of life, so for the most part, we're just vibing. And streams are something you keep on in the background while you're working on other things. So I guess I'm applying my own words. I'm just here streaming as a VTuber to both, I guess, have company, but as a way, well, for me, my perspective on it is to give things back and showcase my way of thinking a bit. It might be conceited, but I think that the way I think is a way people should be more aware of. The insights I have, I don't hear being echoed anywhere online, really. So I figured I might as well put them out there as a first impact. I don't know. Just having a place where you can relax is nice. And I guess that is the purpose for what I'm doing, since I'm relaxing doing this as well. And it'd be nice to have other people find some relaxation in that. And potentially some insights too, as well as self-reflection. Maybe I should rebrand as the self-reflecting VTuber or something. Or go full guru. But I'm just me, and these are just my thoughts. Whether they have meaning to someone else or not, it doesn't really matter to me. I just think that by speaking it into the world, someone might hear something that I said, and they might have a thought, and that thought might lead them down a road to where they can make their life better because it stopped them in their track and made them reconsider something. I'm not here to convince anyone of anything. I'm not here to really sell anything either. I could, I probably should be, but I just want to give while I can and create things, because I have a lot left in me to let out before my clock runs out. It's a bit of a pity, really, that it took me a while to get to this point. And also being faced with the mortality of the human life. But it's what they say, youth is wasted on the young. And I guess only the old are wise? No, that's completely wrong, but I lost that train of thought, so we'll just leave it there. It is interesting, though. Everyone in this world is trying to quote-unquote make it. But I wonder how many people think about what making it means to them, right? Is it money? Is it freedom? Is it power, fame, authority? Like, my objective in life is pretty simple. All that I want is to not worry about expenses when it comes to keeping a roof over my head and getting food on the table. It doesn't even have to be fancy food, it just has to be protein, veggies, and a bit of carbs. I'm very fine with just consuming a block of tofu, some collard greens, a bit of oil, and then like salt, pepper. Because for me, the joy and wonder in life really comes from mastering new skills as well as creating stories and content. Which is probably a bit ironic considering I have not updated my stories for quite a while, but I'm currently on a fitness kick, so when that's over, I'll get back on that. I've learned the hard way that keeping a healthy body is very, 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 very important. I also understood why so many authors go on random hiatus or have to be stopped in their tracks while they're creating. It becomes too easy to sacrifice your health for the sake of your work. I'm not about that life. I want to sustainably create. So I'm focusing on making sure my body is in the absolute best shape it can be before I focus on creating. Like, how should I put this? Say I got isekai, right? I wouldn't go and then focus on training my stats to be strong and rule the world. Instead, I would train my physical stats to a level where I could sit down and write day and night and just churn out stories. Oh, that's a good, actually, idea for a story. I got isekai to another world and accidentally ended up becoming the emperor because I put too many stories out. That seems like it'd be fun. Well, that's absolutely what I would do. I would just train my physical stats to the point where I can not have to worry about my body giving out, and I would just make things constantly. Just write stories, draw art, and create. After all, that's actually giving value back to the world then, because you're leaving in it something that wasn't there before. On the other hand, if you just try to do the old seeking money, getting political power, authority, if you go in that route, or if you just go focus strictly on your body to look swole and ripped and then for the aesthetics, I mean, at the end of the day, what do you have? You can't take it with you to the next life if there is one. And you aren't leaving anything behind either. Nothing that's yours. And in that case, what's the point? Legacy is the reason why we live. And it should be more than just passing along your bloodline. Sure, anyone can make a kid. It's not that difficult. Being a parent is different, but that's a separate topic. What's hard is leaving behind your ideals, your beliefs, your envisioned ideas, the stories that only you could tell, and the worlds that only you saw. That's what is most valuable, and that's what you need to be trying to do. Oh, when I'm saying you here, I'm talking to myself mostly. It's a reminder to myself as well. But I just feel like as a living person, as a human being with the ability and the imperative to choose, you should be choosing to open more choices for the next generation. And I think in my eyes, the best way to get more choices out there is to leave behind seeds of inspiration. And that is created the easiest way through stories, because stories are really what allows people to get by in life. We're a composite of the various stories that we have both experienced and have been told as we live. Sure, we are also the will that chooses, but if you think about it, the choices that you have made spell out a story that you have lived, and that story is what everyone else will eventually gauge the world by. At least one person will. That's the funny thing about life. You might feel that your entire existence is unknown and worthless. You might feel like your story doesn't matter, but there's always someone watching you. When you go outside, if you're in a place with people, someone always notices you. And what they notice about you will become a fraction of who they are because of the way that they reacted to you. So it's important to, I guess, just be mindful that the choices you make do matter. If not to you, to someone else. So you should exercise your will more. It goes back to that. I just want people to exercise their choice of will, or their force of will, not choice of will. How long has it been? Oh, it's almost been 2 hours already. Time really does fly when you're chatting and yapping. I do think that this is helping a lot. This drawing exercise that I am performing. Because it's quite smooth now, what I do. And I am getting the gist that I have a sense now for what looks right and what looks wrong when it comes to anatomy. It's very helpful. I guess yapping like this has helped too. They always say that the best way... that's a fallacy. There is a saying where the best way to teach someone, or the best way to learn something, is to teach someone what you have learned. So I guess that by leaving behind what insights I've gathered, I'm crystallizing it within myself. So it's a win-win. You get all of these gems, and I get to mine more in my head. But man, the world is really a strange place right now, huh? Anyone can pick up their phone, open up an account, and just start speaking whatever they have into the mic, and then push out that video, message, or recording to the entire world, or functionally the entire world. It's such a double-edged sword, but you know, I think it's a good thing, because having a sword is better than not having a sword. You can do a lot now that you could not do before. The only thing that I think people need to remember is that you can't stop the bad from happening in the world, but you can increase the amount of good in the world. And that's how you end up changing things. You don't want to say something is bad and stop there. Instead, you want to go say, this is bad, and here is how you can do good. Then you live being good. Because you're never going to convince someone who has already made up their mind on doing the bad thing. But what you can do is you can affirm the bit of good you see in them, and then show good yourself. Because what kills evil isn't good. What kills evil is the absence of it. Well, okay, there's a distinction to be made here. The act of evil is killed by making its existence non-existent, but evildoers are gotten rid of by, actively acting. You can't just hope that bad people will stop doing bad things. What you can do is make the neutral people stop doing bad things by showing that good is better. This is the problem with thinking about things on the fly. And I think it's also a problem of social media that people forget. Sometimes what comes across as stupidity or malice is just incompleteness. Something can be correct but incomplete. So it's important to just keep that in mind too. If something seems wrong, maybe it's not completely right. So find the missing gaps. I don't know, I'm just spitballing, saying whatever is coming to mind right now. Playing by ear, improvising, and then running through whatever thoughts are being generated while I am keeping my active mind occupied with perceiving and recreating these quick poses. But overall, I guess the message of the day, since it's almost at 2 hours, I'll just reiterate the key points that I want to cover from what we've yapped about. First is that will is what we are. We choose, and we should choose. So go out and exercise your free will a bit more, and determine if what you are acting on is something that you are choosing to act, or if it's an automatic response. Because you can respond to something, or you can choose to initiate something. And you should actively reject commands. Failing to reject a command is submitting to the command, and that begins a slow erosion of your sense of self due to the fact that you are allowing others to dictate the terms of your life. That's the first key point that I would say. The second key point and the main takeaway, I guess, from what I've said today is that you should just play with life a bit and see what you get by doing what other people don't do. Like what I'm doing here, for example. I don't see people spending an hour or more just spamming super quick pose drawings like this. And I think it's giving me something that the other artists I see don't have. I just can't tell what that is yet. But I do know that I am getting something, and it will be something that they will not have. If you want something that no one else has, you have to do what they don't do. So just try doing things that other people don't do. You might get something very unexpected, and it might be what will propel you to stand out and then make a breakthrough moment in your life. What is the last thing that we covered that is important to talk about? Oh, I guess regret. You won't regret things as much if you actively choose what to do. So if you're a person who is filled with regret, you should make a habit of choosing things more actively, and then reminding yourself that the moment you chose that, you let go of everything else. I guess we'll end with this note, and it's an important epiphany that I got a while ago. If you want to let something go, you need to pick something else up in its place. Otherwise, your empty hands will grab what you let go. That's it for me. Hope you're doing well. Bye for now.